Chuck Schumer is marking a milestone, 25 years in the U.S. Senate. This makes him the longest-serving senator in New York history. And in the second part of his series on Schumer, our Washington Bureau reporter Kevin Fry takes a look at what his rise to the powerful position of Senate Majority Leader has meant for New York State.
It was a marquee matchup of the 1998 election. Democratic Congressman Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Al D'Amato facing off in a nasty and costly campaign.
After 18 years, it's time for the hypocrisy to end.
Schumer won, ending D'Amato's 18-year Senate career. More than 2 decades later, D'Amato tips his hat to his successor, praising Schumer's ability to get things done, invoking an example back home.
He hasn't held back when we needed money for our sewage treatment plant and said, oh, that's a Republican stronghold. He worked for it. He got it for us. I want to tell you, I salute him for that. And if there are people in the Republican Party who are annoyed at me for saying these things about him, screw them. I call it the way I see it.
Even as his power and portfolio in Washington have grown, from freshman senator to Senate Majority Leader, Schumer remains tethered to New York.
Let's hear it for Pride, folks.
From parades in Manhattan,
Hi guys, thank you for your service,
to the annual state fair in Syracuse. He makes a point of visiting every one of New York's 62 counties every single year.
I find being on the scene and actually talking to people, real flesh and blood, is a much more effective way both to learn and to understand what people need. So I keep doing it, and I love it. I love it as much today as I did the first year.
We met up with Schumer on one of those trips to Corning in Steuben County. These 62 county swings are a way to connect with conservative upstate voters who are normally suspicious of downstate Democrats. They also dovetail with Schumer's reputation as a workhorse. Schumer says they inspire his legislative work, giving him ideas for macro policy proposals in D.C. that can have tangible micro benefits back home.
There's the local stuff and there's the national stuff. Not only do I like doing both, not only is it an important part of my job to do both, but one helps you do the other.
Perhaps few bills underscore this approach more than the CHIPS and Science Act, legislation designed to encourage the domestic production of semiconductors. Schumer worked with Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young on the bill, an idea hatched in part in the Senate gym.
I could trust him when something needed to be kept confidential over the course of negotiations, never to violate my trust.
The law has triggered commitments for tens of billions of dollars in spending to build computer chip facilities across the country, including in New York, such as Micron's plan to spend up to $100 billion over 20 years to establish a factory outside Syracuse.
If there's a word to describe today, it's transformational.
And IBM's plans to invest $20 billion in the Hudson Valley. Corning CEO Wendell Weeks tells Spectrum News he's worked with Schumer to help make the pitch for these sorts of investments.
I help him with other of my peers from around the world explain why New York can be the right place for them. He is at one time both this national figure working on issues and opportunities of global importance, but at the same time, he is intensely focused on what's happening right here in New York State.
Another Schumer priority? The construction of a new train tunnel under the Hudson River. The current tunnels are more than a century old and were damaged during Hurricane Sandy, making the new tube critical to the future of the New York, Northeast, and U.S. economy. The Trump administration was accused of delaying the long-sought plan. But after Joe Biden entered the White House, Schumer helped push through the bipartisan infrastructure law, securing some of the final chunks of the federal funding required.
With these new dollars, Gateway's future is assured.
Deputy U.S. Transportation Secretary Polly Trottenberg once worked as Schumer's legislative director.
There have been so many near-death experiences for that project. One thing I'd say about Senator Schumer, he always kind of kept hope alive and continued to nudge and push it, and then finally the stars aligned.
Schumer lobbied to keep the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. And in the face of tragedy, stepped in, helping steer federal aid to New York after the 9/11 attack and Superstorm Sandy.
It's just killing me what these people have to go through.
Plus aid to theaters and cultural centers nationwide amid pandemic-induced shutdowns. The Corning Museum of Glass among those receiving the assistance.
It was instrumental in helping us to survive until our visitation returned and got back to pre-COVID numbers again.
One thing Schumer is particularly proud of is ending, at least temporarily, New York's status as a, quote, donor state that sends more money to Washington in tax revenue than it gets back in federal spending. That imbalance was a major frustration of the late Senator Dan Patrick Moynihan. In the past 3 years, fueled by federal COVID relief spending, New York finally received more than it sent away. However, the state comptroller warns the trend may not last. Despite his intense focus on New York and senior status in Democratic circles, aides say one role Schumer has not adopted is that of power broker within the state Democratic apparatus. Whereas his predecessor, D'Amato, is credited with using his influence to make George Pataki the GOP nominee for governor, Schumer's focus has been elsewhere.
Being a party boss or attempting to sort of control the machinations of a political party doesn't necessarily lend itself to the kind of relationships necessary when you've got to build coalitions or you've got to bring home the bacon or you have to bring home policy results.
Ward Todd, a former Republican official in Ulster County, praises Schumer for his willingness to put party aside at times in pursuit of delivering federal spending and projects.
I truly felt as if he was our local representative, much like our congressman was. He was here that often.
And there's this from Schumer's old rival, D'Amato, who was known as Senator Pothole because of his ability to deliver for New York. What kind of senator is Schumer? What would you call him?
Senator Everything. He's all over.
In Washington, Kevin Fry, New York 1.